You're here because you want to get smart fast. You want to understand the nuts and bolts of a topic without slogging through endless reports. Today, we're cracking open the golf swing, specifically looking at something called pelvis sway.
That's right. And to really understand this, we're diving into data captured by the Sportsbox 3D Golf app, guided by the insights of Henrik Jentsch, director of Golf Academy 360 Degrees. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding what this cutting-edge tech reveals about how the body moves in an effective golf swing.
Exactly. Our mission in this deep dive is simple: to explain what pelvis sway is when you're swinging a golf club, how the Sportsbox app measures it, and most importantly, why understanding this can help you, whether you're aiming for a better score or just, well, fascinated by the mechanics of the game. So let's get straight to it. When we talk about pelvis sway, what exactly are we referring to?
Okay, let's unpack this. Henrik explains that the Sportsbox app tracks pelvis sway as the side-to-side movement of the center of your pelvis. That's the midpoint, basically, between your left and right hip joints. Now, here's a foundational point. The app automatically sets your address position how you're standing before you even begin your swing as zero.
Ah, right.
So every inch of sway, every bit of lateral movement is measured in relation to that initial stance. It's all about how much you shift from your starting point.
So it's not just about where your hips are at any point, but the amount they've moved sideways from that initial grounded setup. Got it.
Exactly.
Now, you might be wondering, why does this side-to-side movement even matter in a golf swing? It can't just be like arbitrary motion, can it?
Not at all. Here's where it gets really interesting for your understanding of power in the swing. Henrik emphasizes that the right amount of pelvis sway, timed correctly, can be a real engine for increasing your clubhead speed. Think of it like loading up energy and then releasing it. However, and this is crucial, for consistency, too much sway or sway happening at the wrong moment can lead to inconsistent contact with the ball and a significant loss of power. It's a fine line.
Okay, so it's a delicate balance, not enough movement, and you might be leaving power untapped. Too much, and you're probably sacrificing accuracy.
Precisely.
Now, to visualize this, the source talks about looking at a graph. Can you paint a picture for us of what that graph shows?
Absolutely. Picture a standard graph, with two lines forming an L shape. The horizontal line, the x-axis, represents the timeline of your golf swing.
Right.
It starts when you're at address, moves through the peak of your backswing, then to the moment of impact when the club hits the ball, and ends at your finish position.
Okay.
So that horizontal axis maps out the entire sequence, clearly marking the backswing, the downswing, and the follow-through.
Okay, that's the timing of the swing laid out. What about the vertical line, the axis? What information does that give us?
The vertical axis is where the amount of sway is measured, and the units are in inches. Here's a key detail to keep in mind. The 0 point on this axis is your pelvis position at address, just like we discussed.
Right, the starting point.
Exactly. Values below 0, so negative numbers, indicate that your pelvis has moved away from your intended target. That would be to your right if you're a right-handed golfer.
Okay.
Conversely, values above 0, positive numbers, show movement towards the target to your left for a right-handed golfer. So at any point in your swing, you can see precisely how much and in which direction your pelvis has swayed.
Negative is away, positive is towards. That gives you a clear visual in your mind. Okay. Now, the source begins to discuss observations made from professional golfers. What are some of the general patterns they see in how the pelvis moves during a tour pro's swing?
Well, what's fascinating to consider is the very initial movement in the backswing. Henrik points out that typically a pro golfer will have a slight movement of their pelvis away from the target in the early stages.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, it's not usually a huge shift, but it's there. But here's a crucial insight. Even while they're still in the backswing, before their hips fully rotate or turn, the pelvis actually starts to shift back towards the target.
Really? During the back?
Yes. This early shift is one of the first dominoes to fall in the sequence of the downswing. It's quite important.
That's probably not what you'd intuitively think, right? You might assume everything moves away to load up power, but you're saying the pros are already beginning that move back even before their backswing is complete.
Exactly. And this is often a key differentiator for elite players. Henrik mentions that by the time they reach the top of their backswing, many tour pros will have their pelvis either back to their original address position
To 0.
or even slightly ahead of it, meaning it's already moved a bit towards the target. This early move towards the target creates what's often called transition, allowing the golfer to leverage ground reaction forces more effectively at the start of the downswing,
Ah, okay.
which leads to increased rotational speed and ultimately more power. It's not just about position, it's about setting up the sequence correctly.
Wow, so they're already setting themselves up to drive forward as they transition. That sounds incredibly efficient for maximizing energy transfer. What happens from that point?
Well, during the downswing, that sway towards the target really picks up speed. It's a rapid increase as they transfer their weight and build up speed leading into impact.
Makes sense.
Interestingly, the data frequently shows a brief stabilization, almost a flat spot, in that sway curve, right around the moment the club meets the ball.
A flat spot, like a pause.
Sort of. It's like everything aligns and becomes stable just as they strike the ball, which, makes sense for clean and powerful contact.
Yeah, a moment of stillness amidst all that motion. That makes sense for consistent impact. And what happens after they hit the ball through the follow-through to the very end?
The pelvis continues its movement towards the target all the way through the follow-through and into the final finish position, the continuation of that forward momentum.
Okay.
So, if we were to summarize the general pattern of pelvis sway in an effective golf swing, how would you describe it?
Well, based on what we've discussed, it sounds like a load away slightly at the start of the backswing, then a critical move towards that begins even before reaching the top, followed by a rapid acceleration towards the target during the downswing, a stabilize right around impact, and then a continued finish moving towards the target.
You got it. Henrik himself uses a very similar and memorable phrase: load away, move towards, stabilize, and finish. It's a really concise way to think about the efficient transfer of weight and power throughout the swing.
Okay, so we have the general roadmap of pelvis sway. Now let's dig into some of the specific data. The source provides actual numbers, average measurements for tour pros, both men and women. What do these numbers tell us about the typical amount of pelvis sway at key points?
Right. And it's important to remember that the graph we initially described was just one example. These numbers Henrik provides are averages taken from many pros, and they even include the standard deviation.
Which tells us about the variation.
Exactly. It gives us an idea of how much individual swings can vary around these averages. A smaller deviation means they're all doing something very similar. A larger one suggests more individual styles. So let's break down those averages.
Sounds good. Let's start at the beginning. What's the average amount of sway at the point of maximum backswing for the pros?
Okay, at their maximum point in the backswing, the men average about 1 inch away from their initial address position,
1 inch away.
and the women average a little bit more at 1.1 inches away. So just that slight bit of load away we talked about.
Just a small initial shift. Okay. Now, what about when they reach the very top of their backswing right before they start the downswing?
This is where that interesting shift back towards the target really becomes clear in the averages. For the men, at the top of the backswing, the average is 0.3 inches towards the target.
So past zero.
On average, yes. They've already moved past their starting position. For the women, the average is very close to zero, just 0.1 inches away from the address position. Still very close.
That's a notable difference from the maximum backswing position, though. They've already begun that crucial transition.
Definitely.
And you mentioned a standard deviation of plus or minus 0.9 inches at this point. What does that tell us about the range we might see?
Well, that standard deviation highlights that there's still some variation, even among the pros. It means that roughly 68% of tour professionals will have their pelvis position within that 0.9-inch range above or below those average numbers at the top.
I see.
So while the average for men is 0.3 inches towards, some might still be slightly away and others might be even further ahead, These averages give you a good general trend, but individual swings have nuances.
Absolutely. Averages give you a central point, but there's always a spectrum.
Okay, so they're starting to move towards the target at the top. What happens by the time they actually make contact with the ball at impact?
By the moment of impact, that movement towards the target has really accelerated. The men average a pelvis sway of 4.3 inches towards the target.
Wow, 4.3 inches.
And the women average 3.1 inches towards Kinsarea. So yeah, they've moved quite a bit forward from their initial setup position by then.
That's a significant shift of weight and momentum towards the target. And finally, what about at the very end of the swing, in the full finish position? By the time they reach their finish, the momentum continues to carry the pelvis even further towards the target. The men average almost 8 inches towards.
8 inches.
And the women average around 7.5 inches towards. So a substantial final movement in that direction.
So just to be crystal clear, all that movement From that transition in the backswing all the way through to the finish is predominantly towards the target.
That's right.
That initial small movement away is really just to help initiate and load the swing.
Exactly. The overall picture of efficient pelvis sway is a loading phase moving slightly away, followed by a continuous movement and transfer of weight directly towards the target, culminating in that full finish.
This has provided incredible insight into a key element of the golf swing. We've covered what pelvis sway is, how it's measured, its vital role in power and consistency, and the actual data from pros. So as a final thought, what are the most important things folks should remember about pelvis sway?
I think the key things are pelvis sway, that side-to-side hip movement, is measured relative to your setup. A well-timed sway is critical for power, but too much kills consistency.
Right.
The general pattern in pros: slight load away early, move towards before the top, accelerate through, stabilize at impact, and continue towards the finish. And that load away, move towards, stabilize, and finish idea is a really useful way to think about it.
Absolutely. It gives you a clear understanding of the forces at play. So, as you consider your own swing, or even when you're watching golf, think about this. How might this knowledge of pelvis sway prompt you to reconsider the seemingly minor movements? What other subtle biomechanical elements might have a surprisingly big impact? It really encourages you to think about the intricate details within any athletic movement and might spark a deeper curiosity in, well, the fascinating field of sports biomechanics.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.